My name is Jamin Goecker. I'm an associate real estate broker in the state of Alaska, and my mission is to help you to build an intentional and significant legacy for yourself and your family by coaching you in real estate. And today, we're going to be talking about what's going on in the MatSu Valley, looking specifically at the residential, the condo, such as it is, and the multifamily markets. Before we get started, though, do make sure to give this video a like, subscribe, and do all that stuff to make it easier for other people to find this content. And let's go and jump into today's market update. Now, the first thing that we're looking at here is the total number of homes available on the market actually saw a very modest increase for the number of properties available compared to where we saw it this time last year, because there was about 284 properties available on the market this time last year in April. Now there's 294 that are available. So that's a very slight increase, and we've actually seen a very modest increase year over year compared to the previous year for the number of properties available on the market. Just 10 homes more than what we saw the year before is actually the most modest increase we've seen so far, because that went up by approximately 60 properties last month. In the month of February, it went up by nearly 80. And then for the month of January, we saw that it went up by about 70. So only going up 10 is the most modest increase we've seen so far. 294 is still pretty small inventory for that particular month. The most we've ever seen was back in 2016, where there was about 706 properties available on the market at the time. So that just kind of gives you a historical idea for how low the inventory is right now, still compared in the grand scheme of things. Now, the next thing we see is that the number of properties that actually sold went from about 189 the year before to 124 for this past month in April. So not a huge surprise there, just given what we know about the short inventory and the fact that interest rates are going up compared to what we saw this time last year. So they're starting to pull back a bit on the demand. Now, the next thing we see is the average sold price went from about $383,000 the year before to about $382,000 the next year. And obviously, those are very approximate numbers. So realistically, you're within the margin of error. I think it's like 0.02% of a decrease. So that's clearly within the margin of error. Really, the big takeaway is that it's really staying about where it was the previous year and for the just year to date. But let's take a look and see what's going on. Just looking at the months where we have all the completed data, because keep in mind, year to date is going to be tracking year to date. And really what I want to look at is the months where we have all the completed information reported in so far. So for the month of January, average sold price increased from about $364,000 to about $382,000 for this year. February, it went from about $366,000 in February of last year to $375,000. For the month of March, it went from about $355,000 to $370,000 for this year. And then for the month of April, it had kind of a modest increase from about $392,000 to $399,000. So we are seeing the rate at which things are going up is starting to come down a little bit. It might just be kind of the time of the year and the seasonality that we see right there, because we have a lot of new construction that comes on the market around the spring time frame, and that's not going to be closing around like the June or July time frame. So I suspect we're going to see this really increase in the next coming months as we see a lot of these new construction homes selling, and that's just kind of what we expect moving forward into the spring and summertime. Now let's go ahead and take a look and see what's going on in the condo market. This time last year, for the total number of condos that were available on the market in the MatSu Valley, it went from 5 this time last year, and it came down to 4 this year. That's pretty low historically. The highest we've seen it, I think it was right around 18 or 20 around this time of year back in 2016, 2015. So you see the 4 really historically is pretty low for this time of year. Now, the next thing we see is that this time last year, the total number of condos that sold in the MatSu Valley went from 5, and then it came down to 1 for this year. So not a whole lot of movement there in the grand scheme of things, one way or the other, but proportionally, yes, we do see that the shrinkage in what's available on the market is definitely impacting just the total number of properties that can get under contract and then close. Next thing we see is the average sold price went from about $268,000 the year before to about $219,000 approximately. So on the grand scheme of things, that's a decrease by about 18%. from what we saw year over year. We start getting into such a small sample pool like this. I mean, it really just depends at this point exactly where these condos are. It's not gonna, it's really hard to draw any kind of actual statistical analysis when you have such a small sample size, because in this case, it really does come down to this condo versus this condo for this year. Now, if there was like 100 this year and 100 the next year, you kind of get a good average kind of put together in there. And that's not what we get here. So I would expect if you sold a condo this time last year, you would probably make less than if you sold it this year. So if that helps, feel free to use that. Now let's go and take a break real quick. For those of you who have been thinking about moving up here to Alaska for a while, I do have a copy of my relocation guide still available to you who are considering making a move up here. So if that is something that would benefit you, go to my website. Link for that is going to be in the description down below. And make sure to just subscribe to the website and put relocation guide in the little comment section so I know what to send you. And also, every other week we have a new live stream featuring some new guests that are coming in and talking about their experience of living up here in Alaska. So make sure that you're watching for that and you have your calendar cleared to sit in on those live streams, which are usually every other Thursday, 5 o'clock Alaska time. So stay tuned for those. The next thing I want to look at is what's going on in the multifamily market. And what we're seeing here is that the number of properties available on the market went from 17 this time last year to 30 this time this year. Now, before we get too excited, because I mean, I am an investor myself, and these numbers kind of make me a little excited because I'm like, yes, that means we're starting to get some options, and maybe some of these prices will ease up a bit out here. And that I wouldn't really expect that, because a couple of years ago, we were actually seeing about 50 to 60 properties available on the market this time of year. So even though it's gone up, yes, but it's still about half of what we historically would have around this time of year. So inventory still does remain pretty low for multifamily properties in the MatSu Valley. The next thing we see is that the number of properties, not surprisingly, went from about 12 that have actually sold this time last year in April to 8 this year. Not a huge surprise given the amount of inventory that we have and interest rates going up. The interest rates really do have a pretty direct impact on investment properties, because so much of the bottom line for the property, whether it pencils out or not, really does kind of hinge on whether or not that the properties can be secured at a low interest rate. Now, the next thing we see is going to be the average sold price for multifamilies in the MatSu Valley. So the first thing I'm going to say about that is multifamily really does incorporate everything from the duplex all the way up to the big, enormous commercial residential apartment unit property. I'm saying that correctly. And it really does include quite a bit. So I'm just caveating that, but the average sold price went from about $494,000 to about $562,000 for this current year. So as you can see, that's a pretty sizable increase for the year to date, and it pretty much does hold true really for the entire months, where we have all the completed data. For the month of January, it went from about 414 up to about 550. For the month of February, it went from 424 to 612. For the month of March, it went from 498 to about 599, and then for the month of April, it went from 485 up to about 505,000. So across the board, we do continue to see a pretty aggressive appreciation for multifamily properties in the MatSu Valley. I'm not expecting that to go away anytime soon, just because once we do find ourselves in a time of inflation, those rents are going to be going up, which in turn means that multifamily properties are going to become more profitable. So what does this all mean to you? So if you're a buyer, it means we're starting to see more options available in the MatSu Valley from what we've seen in previous years. Not quite as much right now as what we've seen in the previous months. Proportionally, it is starting to get drawn back a little bit. We'll see if that trend does continue. I suspect we're going to see some more options popping up here, probably more in the new construction arena, more so than anything else. If you are a seller, the market is really solid right now. If you're still wanting to get out there and sell your property, as long as the total amount of properties available remains pretty low. I'm not really expecting to see a big collapse or anything like that anytime in the near future. You're going to see a ton of headlines. Ignore them. They're really designed just to scare the heck out of you. Focus on the data and let everyone else panic and run around like chickens with their heads cut off. And I will give you the actual local data that's going to help you make the best decision for here. Now, if you're an investor, MatSu Valley is a great place to be looking for that. We just have to make sure everything pencils out and it actually makes sense. Some properties, even with all the demand out here, aren't just going to forever be sitting on the market because some sellers, I know this is going to be a shock, some landlords are just completely unrealistic about the value of their property. So just because it's multifamily and inflation is making rents go up doesn't mean that everything is going to pencil out. So we have to take a look at everything, but let's talk and see what that looks like for you. So thank you for listening. If you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to me in the description section down below. You'll be able to contact me on my website. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.